How long had he waited for this very moment? He stretched out his hand, convinced that it had finally arrived. Opening his eyes in an unfamiliar room, he was greeted by the unmistakable feeling of staring at a completely new ceiling. Whether it was possession, transmigration, or reincarnation, he had no doubt that he had finally succeeded. His name was Kim Sung-woo, an ordinary Korean who had spent his entire life preparing for an opportunity like this. He had consumed every novel, web novel, book, video game, and fantasy story he could find, studying each one in obsessive detail. No story escaped his scrutiny. Sung-woo was the type of critic who would write 50,000 character essays explaining exactly why someone else's story failed. Day after day, he analyzed every detail with relentless dedication, almost like an obsessed scholar. He had memorized world-building systems, intricate character relationships, hidden item locations, and the positions of legendary artifacts. There was hardly anything he didn't know. Eventually, his constant criticism and harsh comments earned him bans from nearly every online community. Countless authors despised him because of his ruthless reviews. Even so, destiny finally granted him the reward he had always dreamed of. After transmigrating into another world, he discovered that he had awakened in a peaceful rural village that looked like it belonged in a medieval fairy tale. Even worse, he had become a 4- or 5-year-old child. The first thing he tried was checking his status. Filled with confidence, he raised his hand and declared, "Status window." Nothing happened. There wasn't even a tiny floating message. Silence. Scratching his head, he quickly realized this wasn't the typical isekai world with a game-like system. Still, that didn't discourage him. He had studied thousands of stories that didn't rely on status windows, so he believed his knowledge alone would let him conquer this world. His backup plan was simple: introduce modern inventions and become rich. Surely that couldn't be too difficult. He had been reborn as Ivan Petrovich, the son of poor, illiterate farmers who didn't even know the official name of the country they lived in. Every day, they worked from sunrise to sunset just to survive. Sung-woo's first idea was to revolutionize the market by creating soap. It failed spectacularly. Reality was nothing like the novels he had read. Instead of becoming a wealthy inventor, he was scolded and beaten by his mother for carelessly handling lye. To make matters worse, he discovered that soap already existed in this world. What an embarrassing failure. Around his 6th week in the village, while collecting eggs, he noticed people delivering newspapers. He froze. If newspapers and printing presses existed even in a remote farming village, then this world definitely wasn't stuck in the Middle Ages. That single discovery forced him to eliminate nearly every possibility from the list of fantasy worlds he had memorized. As the months passed, Sung-woo eventually learned the name of the kingdom and the identity of its ruler. Even then, nothing matched anything he had ever read. Frustrated, he threw the last remaining list of possible worlds into the campfire. Nothing fit. He didn't recognize the kingdom, the king, or even the neighboring nations. Sitting beside the fire, he stopped asking which story he had entered. Instead, he wondered what kind of genre he had been thrown into. Then, during his 4th year in this new life, reality struck without mercy. The Demon King launched an invasion. Royal soldiers arrived at the village to recruit every able-bodied man into the army. Ivan's mother was ordered to remain behind with her son while Ivan's father was forcibly drafted to the front. His father promised that he would return safely, but the grim expressions on the soldiers' faces suggested otherwise. Ivan and his mother could do nothing except watch as he was marched away toward the battlefield. It was the last time they would ever see him. From that day onward, the boundary between Kim Sung-woo's memories and Ivan's identity slowly faded until they became one. By the age of 6, Ivan had already grown accustomed to exhausting farm work, doing everything he could to ease his mother's burden while enduring a harsh and unforgiving life. When he turned 12, he devoted every spare moment to learning the local language and writing system, determined to uncover the truth about the world he now lived in. Then, at the age of 14, the tragedy he had feared finally arrived. An official notice confirmed that his father had died in the war. The document had actually been issued 2 years earlier. Gripping the notification tightly, Ivan burned with anger and disbelief. What kind of world was this? An isekai where gunpowder, steam engines, knights, powerful mages, and the Demon King all existed together. All of it had been thrown together into one brutal, blood-soaked war. Ivan stared silently into the distance. His life had become such a tangled mess that even someone as knowledgeable and analytical as he once was could no longer make sense of it. His mother was devastated, crying endlessly after receiving the news of her husband's death. Watching her suffer filled Ivan with overwhelming guilt. He felt like the cruelest person in the world for living inside the body of her real son. The very next day, he made a life-changing decision. "Don't worry, Mom," he said in a calm, emotionless voice that sounded disturbingly mature for a 14-year-old. He enlisted in the army. By then, the military had already begun using steam-powered trains. The yearly salary was a miserable 15 copper coins, but Ivan decided to send every coin home. It wasn't because he believed he was a devoted son. He simply wanted to ease the guilt of taking away the woman's only remaining child. It didn't take long for him to realize that this body possessed an extraordinary natural talent for combat. By the age of 18, Ivan had spent 4 relentless years fighting on the front lines. The inexperienced recruit he once was had become a battle-hardened veteran with countless military achievements. Despite his personal success, the war itself was falling apart. Front lines were collapsing across the continent, while nearly half of the Allied nations had been reduced to burning ruins. Just when hope seemed completely lost, the legendary hero finally appeared. She was the father of Isabel. The moment Ivan heard that name, something clicked in his mind. At last, he thought he had identified the genre of this world. It was a classic, heroic fantasy, a traditional RPG adventure centered around the hero's journey. The hero's arrival inspired countless people, but life in the trenches remained as horrific as ever. Where Ivan fought, monsters continued slaughtering soldiers by the hundreds. Ordinary troops were still crushed mercilessly, regardless of the legendary battles taking place elsewhere. By the time he reached the age of 28, Ivan had served 14 uninterrupted years on the battlefield. At last, the war began to shift in humanity's favor as the hero's party defeated the Demon King's generals one after another. Eventually, Ivan was transferred into an elite military unit responsible for the most dangerous and unpleasant missions of the war. It was known as the Extermination Squad, a special operations force dispatched whenever enemy remnants needed to be wiped out amid battlefield chaos. 2 years later, the hero's party finally defeated the Demon King. For the first time in decades, Ivan believed he could see the light at the end of the tunnel. He patiently waited for what he imagined would be the story's ending, convinced that once the Demon King was defeated, this strange world would finally release him. But 2 more years passed. Nothing happened. Now 32 years old, Ivan watched as the extermination squad shrank to barely 1/5 of its original size. The war was over, and the army no longer had any real use for the unit. High Command was already planning to disband it. Rather than waiting, Ivan volunteered for one final mission, a task so dangerous that it was practically a suicide operation. Against all odds, he survived. The moment he returned, he immediately requested his discharge from military service. He couldn't bear spending another moment as a soldier. More than anything, he wanted this endless epilogue to finally come to an end. 30 years after his transmigration, 34-year-old Ivan returned to his hometown. Nothing awaited him there. His mother had passed away 10 years earlier. With no family left and nowhere to belong, he chose to establish an orphanage near the capital for children who had lost everything during the war. Since the ending of this strange world still refused to arrive, he decided to give his life a new purpose. That was how the Basilissa orphanage came into existence. Ivan became the guardian of countless children who, just like him, had lost everything they once treasured. Letting out a weary sigh, Ivan reviewed the stack of paperwork on his desk, exhausted by the endless routine of daily life. He picked up his journal and began writing. More than anything, he missed his former life in Korea. He missed home. He missed its food. If he ever managed to return, he made a list of everything he wanted to eat first. Kimchi, fried chicken, hot, hearty stews. The longing was so intense that it ached deep within his soul. It had already been 4 years since the Demon King's defeat. Just when was this story finally going to end? Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Years of battlefield experience immediately put Ivan on high alert. He froze and instinctively analyzed every detail of the approaching footsteps, the rhythm, the weight, and the steady pace. The creaking of worn leather boots, the faint smell of gunpowder, and the measured stride led him to a single conclusion. The visitor wasn't a civilian. It was a highly trained soldier, and he had come alone. Ivan remained completely alert. His hand instinctively wrapped around his weapon as years of muscle memory reminded him exactly how to kill. Although he had been retired for years, those instincts had never disappeared. The office door slowly opened. A familiar figure stepped inside. Dmitri. He entered with a bright smile. "It's been a long time, sir. How have you been? I should have visited you much sooner." Ivan didn't return the smile. Instead, he greeted Dmitri while holding a hand axe. "You should have knocked," he said coldly. Dmitri sighed, complaining that Ivan was always so direct. He also joked that growing a beard didn't suit him at all. Ivan lowered the axe, though his expression remained serious. "Why are you here?" he asked without wasting another word. Dmitri reached into his uniform and produced a sealed envelope. You won't even let me sit down first. You're just as impatient as ever. Anyway, this is for you. He handed over the letter. Ivan examined the official seal with suspicion. Dmitri smiled and urged him to open it. Read it. It's a personal letter from Her Highness, the princess. Ivan looked at him suspiciously. What is it, poison? He asked dryly. Dmitri laughed. I doubt it. She probably just wants to know how retirement has been treating you. Ivan wasn't convinced. The princess would never send a high-ranking officer across the country simply to exchange pleasantries. So Her Highness suddenly wants to know how I'm doing, Ivan muttered under his breath. The woman in question was Princess Elizabeth Karolina Kresilov, better known across the kingdom as the Iron-Blooded Lisa. She was not someone who ever wasted time on meaningless conversation. Ivan quickly pieced everything together. She must be in an incredibly difficult position. Dmitri confirmed his suspicion. The military leadership was pressuring Princess Lisa every day to reduce the size of the army. On top of that, Crown Prince Alexander was trying to divide the kingdom into 5 separate territories and sell them to the highest bidders. Meanwhile, the king remained completely silent, refusing to interfere. The future of the kingdom itself was hanging by a thread. Changing the subject, Dmitri revealed another surprising development. There's something else. During the war, an international university was established. It's now the most prestigious academy in all the allied nations. He was talking about Yansk University. Dmitri then asked if Ivan knew who would be joining the incoming class of freshmen and the newly appointed faculty. The first name was Isabel, daughter of the legendary hero Maximilian and heir to extraordinary power. Next came Oscar, the son of the renowned knight Galbad, famous for his exceptional skill with a spear. Then there was Alfara, the gifted daughter of the great mage Beal Green. Joining them were Neris, daughter of Inar the Berserker, and Lucia, the disciple of the legendary thief Enrique. Every one of them was an extraordinary talent. In short, the children of every hero who had helped defeat the Demon King would be studying there. As if that weren't enough, Patricia, the former saint of the Heroes Party, had been appointed as the head of a department. The academy had gathered the world's brightest young talents, all of whom had trained tirelessly to earn admission. Dmitri's expression grew serious. If even one of those students is injured or dies, he warned, this kingdom is finished. Ivan immediately understood the weight of those words. And what exactly does that have to do with me? He asked. Dmitri answered without hesitation. Your mission is to protect them for the next 3 years. Make sure not a single one of them suffers even the smallest injury until they safely return to their respective countries. Ivan slowly closed his eyes in frustration. Why had the aftermath of the hero's story turned into this? The cliché ending where the hero defeats the Demon King and everyone lives happily ever after was nothing more than a fantasy. The world was still drowning in political conflict and social instability. And now, without warning, the story had suddenly shifted into an academy setting. Something about it felt terribly wrong. Then Ivan suddenly froze. A realization struck him like lightning. His mind raced as every piece of the puzzle finally fell into place. Wait. His eyes sharpened with a dangerous glint. He had finally figured it out. Ivan slammed his hand onto the desk so hard that the entire room shook. A crimson aura of suppressed rage seemed to radiate from him. Dmitri stared in complete confusion, unable to understand what had just happened. Damn it! Ivan's shout echoed through the room as he struggled to contain his fury. His fist tightened against the wooden desk. Then the horrifying truth finally hit him. Dmitri stepped back nervously. Sir, what's wrong? Are you all right? But Ivan could only focus on one terrifying possibility. Was this an academy novel? For 30 long years, he had struggled through endless battles in this unfamiliar world. 30 years of war. 30 years of blood, sweat, sacrifice, and suffering. Only to discover that everything he had endured was nothing more than the prologue to the real story. The cruel irony was almost impossible to accept. After taking a long breath, Ivan finally calmed himself, although the anger still burned fiercely in his eyes. So all I have to do is make sure those kids graduate. He let out a quiet sigh. Fine. Let's see this story through to the end. I accept the mission. His voice carried unwavering determination. It was finally time to go home. Kim Seung-woo was ready to bring this long journey to its conclusion. Lisa's letter still rested open on his desk. Bonka, how have you been? I occasionally hear news about you, and I'm relieved to know you're doing well. As he continued reading, Lisa reminisced about the days they had spent tending the garden together. She regretted that he had left without even looking back, never giving her the chance to host one last tea party. But, Bonka, winter is approaching once again. A winter even colder and quieter than the last. Those words carried a quiet sadness. As she wrote, Lisa wandered through the palace gardens, gently brushing the leaves with her fingertips while thinking about her old companion, my most trusted lumberjack Bunka. Her words reflected the deep trust and friendship she still held for him. She promised to reward him 3 times over with anything he desired. If that still wasn't enough, she was willing to repay him with her friendship. And if even that could not settle the debt, then she would repay him with the memories they shared. Every line of the letter carried genuine sincerity. Finally, Lisa revealed the true purpose of her message. The kingdom still needs your strength. Just as you once devoted yourself to protecting it, I ask that you do so one more time. The letter ended with a respectful closing. My warmest regards, Kurolovna. Ivan silently finished reading every word. He now fully understood his assignment. For the next 3 years, while the children of the hero's party attended Yansk University, he would protect them from the shadows. Not a single one of them could be allowed to die or even suffer an injury. Only then did Ivan realize the truth. This world had been an academy story from the very beginning. If he could endure just 3 more years and witness the true ending, perhaps his greatest wish would finally come true. He might finally be able to return home. Ivan turned to Dmitri and asked who would be arriving at the academy first. Dmitri replied that the daughter of King Inar of Drone was already on her way, making her the first student scheduled to arrive. Inar, Ivan murmured. Hearing the name of his former comrade immediately brought back countless memories. To the rest of the world, Inar was the great king of Drone. But to Ivan, he would always be the reckless, hot-headed member of the hero's party. He could almost hear the man's booming laughter. Bunka. Hey little Ivan, this is how you swing an axe. The berserker had been an absolute monster on the battlefield. And now, the first student heading to the academy was none other than his daughter, who had inherited both his overwhelming strength and explosive personality. Back in the kingdom of Drone, the princess's departure had become a grand national celebration. The people cheered proudly. Our kingdom's greatest descendant. Music filled the streets as citizens celebrated her journey, fully convinced she would excel at whatever she pursued. Among the crowd, however, a few people whispered with amused smiles. Did you hear? She's going there to study orchestral music. Nerys, the eldest daughter of the berserker, frowned when she overheard them. What's wrong with studying orchestral music? She thought indignantly. Orchestra, she shouted back with determination. With an instrument case strapped securely across her back and unwavering resolve in her eyes, Nerys promised herself that she would prove everyone wrong by becoming a remarkable musician. The Knights of Drone gave their princess a magnificent farewell worthy of her royal lineage. 2 days later, her train raced through snow-covered mountains. Without warning, disaster struck. A violent explosion derailed the train, sending burning wreckage and twisted metal flying in every direction. Just like that, the story's first major incident had begun. What? A terrorist attack on the train? Ivan exclaimed after receiving the report. Dmitri nodded grimly. It was a carefully planned attack. Ivan fell silent as he stared out the window, watching the setting sun sink below the horizon. He understood something that most people never could. Nothing in this world happened by coincidence. Everything followed the logic of a story. In a typical heroic fantasy, the hero defeats the demon king, peace returns to the world, and everyone lives happily ever after. Sometimes, one of the demon king's generals even joins the hero's side before the final battle. No matter the path, light always triumphs over darkness. Those were the universal rules of classic fantasy. The peace won through unimaginable sacrifice was supposed to last forever. But every genre followed its own rules. And in an academy story, danger appeared at the worst possible moments to test the new students. Ivan suddenly remembered the notes and lists he had burned 30 years ago after arriving in this world. Back then, none of it had made sense. Now it did. Standing at Igorovich Station, Ivan waited for the very train that the story had already marked for a terrorist attack. Time was running out. Calmly, sitting on a bench with a newspaper in his hands, he secretly observed every movement around the station. He understood this genre perfectly. The station clock struck exactly 9 o'clock. The train carrying Princess Nerys was about to arrive. And with it, chaos. Ivan was prepared to stop the disaster before it unfolded. If someone intended to assassinate Nerys, this border station was the perfect place. Beyond this point lay heavily guarded military territory, making another opportunity nearly impossible. This was their only chance. As Ivan quietly observed the platform, he could only shake his head. What a bunch of amateurs. Without solid evidence, he couldn't call in military reinforcements. That meant dealing with the 3 suspicious individuals by himself. The man sitting on a nearby bench claimed to be waiting for a train. Yet he had already ignored 3 separate arrivals without boarding any of them. Another suspect was pretending to be a vegetable vendor. Who would buy fresh vegetables at an almost deserted station at this hour? Worse still, the man couldn't stop nervously looking around. Ivan silently walked behind the man sitting on the bench. The stranger's body stiffened the instant he sensed someone standing over him. Before he could react, Ivan pressed the cold barrel of a pistol against the back of his neck. The man's face instantly turned pale. Who are you?" he stammered. "Quiet." Ivan's calm voice was far more frightening than a shout. The other 2 disguised accomplices immediately reacted. They abandoned their act and yelled for him to stop. "Freeze!" Ivan almost laughed. Ridiculous. From where they were standing, they shouldn't even have been able to see the pistol. Their immediate reaction only confirmed that the 3 of them were working together. "Who sent you?" Ivan asked, his finger already resting on the trigger. The man never had the chance to answer. A single gunshot echoed through the station. The bullet pierced his head, and his lifeless body collapsed as blood splattered across the nearby wall. Ivan's attention instantly shifted to the remaining 2 attackers. If they had been legitimate government agents, they would have identified themselves instead of reacting in blind panic. Their behavior made their guilt obvious. The remaining terrorists immediately opened fire. "Kill him!" Bullets flew across the station. Ivan moved like a bolt of lightning, effortlessly avoiding the wild barrage. To a veteran who had survived decades of war, these men were nothing more than frightened amateurs shooting without discipline. In an instant, he closed the distance. Standing directly before one of the gunmen, Ivan swung his trusted hand axe. He deflected the incoming attack and countered in one smooth motion. The blade sliced cleanly through the man's forearm before he could even raise his weapon again. Without slowing down, Ivan charged at the second operative with frightening speed. What followed was nothing short of a massacre. In only a few moments, he eliminated the remaining threat with precise, efficient movements. Standing over the blood-soaked scene, the veteran looked down on them with complete contempt. These men had clearly never faced a real soldier. The only survivor writhed on the ground, crying in agony while clutching the stump where his severed arm had once been. Ivan stepped closer and spoke in a calm, emotionless voice. "You'll bleed to death in less than 3 minutes if you don't stop the bleeding." Then he asked his question. "Where are the others?" Overwhelmed by fear, the wounded man broke immediately. He confessed that another 15 armed men were waiting farther down the railway tracks. Desperately begging for his life, he offered every piece of information he knew. Ivan quickly realized these 3 had only been advanced scouts. The real ambush force was still waiting ahead. The man continued pleading. "If you spare me, I can still help you. We were only told the train was transporting gold and valuable cargo from Drone." He sounded completely desperate. Ivan looked down at him. "So you really have no idea who was actually on that train?" The man frantically shook his head. "I swear on my life. Everything I've told you is the truth. I haven't lied about anything." Ivan quietly took another step forward. "No. You did tell one lie." Before the man could react, Ivan buried his hand axe deep into his neck. "The lie was believing that an amateur like you could ever be useful to someone like me." He pulled out his pocket watch. The time read 9:53 a.m. Only a few minutes remained before the train's scheduled arrival. Ivan calmly put on a fresh pair of leather gloves and began cleaning the scene. During his years in the extermination squad, he had learned that a properly trained operative needed exactly 5 minutes to erase every trace of a battlefield. Bodies disappeared. Bloodstains were removed. Evidence vanished. By 9:58 a.m., the station looked perfectly ordinary, as though no violence had ever occurred there. Only 2 minutes remained. Ivan straightened his coat and quietly waited for the arriving train. Not a single trace of the slaughter remained. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, Princess Elizabeth requested an update on Bunka. Dmitri informed her that Ivan appeared to have predicted a terrorist attack on the train, correctly identifying both the date and the location before it happened. Elizabeth wondered whether he had built a secret intelligence network. Dmitri shook his head. For the past 4 years, he hasn't made contact with anyone suspicious. It simply seems that he knows things before they happen. Elizabeth smiled faintly. "Keep watching him. Don't overlook even the smallest detail. I want every action he takes recorded and delivered directly to my desk." She wanted a complete record of everything Ivan did. She reminded Dmitri that 4 years earlier, Bunka had also volunteered for what everyone believed was a suicide mission based entirely on his own instincts. Even when his actions looked like reckless guesses, she believed every decision he made was backed by careful reasoning. Far away, on a snow-covered bridge, a hidden terrorist reached for the detonator. "I'm certain this will work," he thought. Watching from a distance, Ivan understood the rules of Academy stories better than anyone. He knew that an attack before the beginning of the school year would never kill an important character like Princess Nerus, who was anxiously sitting inside one of the train's carriages. As he looked at the explosives planted beneath the tracks, Ivan realized this entire incident was simply the opening event of the story. It was nothing more than a tutorial designed to introduce the world's dangers. That was exactly why he had no intention of preventing the explosion itself. The leader of the terrorists waited for the signal. Then, click, the detonator was pressed. An instant later, the bridge erupted in a deafening explosion. The blast tore through the rails as violent shockwaves rippled across the steel structure. The train lurched violently before leaving the tracks. Inside the carriage, Nerus grabbed onto the wall as everything around her shook uncontrollably. Ivan remained perfectly calm. Those dramatic rescues belonged to the story's true protagonist. His objective was completely different. He intended to find the organization behind the attack and wipe it out before it could threaten the Academy again. Using the raging snowstorm as cover, Ivan moved silently through the blizzard. He preferred eliminating enemies from the shadows instead of fighting loud, drawn-out battles. That silent efficiency was the trademark of the extermination squad. With icy composure, he raised his weapon. The overturned train burned across the frozen landscape while smoke and flames filled the air. The raiders burst into laughter. Believing the attack had succeeded, they eagerly prepared to loot every valuable item they could find and sell everything on the black market. Then, a single streak flashed through the snowy sky. A bullet whistled past the leader's ear. The man beside him wasn't as fortunate. The round struck him squarely in the head, killing him instantly. Ivan watched without emotion, getting shaken by a single gunshot. That was the unmistakable sign of an amateur. The dead man's body collapsed into the snow. Panic immediately spread through the raiders. Their leader shouted furiously while searching the surrounding area. "Who's out there?" Ivan quietly observed them. These men couldn't even sense genuine danger. They had no idea a marksman already had them in his sights. Emerging from the snowy mist, Ivan calmly asked, "Are you the one in charge?" "Fire," the leader roared. Every surviving mercenary immediately opened fire. Ivan didn't even flinch. His eyes calmly followed every incoming bullet. To a veteran like him, reading firing lines and avoiding gunfire was effortless. He knew from decades of experience that ordinary firearms were almost useless against truly high-level warriors. A shooter's killing intent always revealed exactly where the bullets were going. Killing intent naturally follows the path of a projectile, making firearms easy to predict for anyone with genuine battlefield experience. For close-range combat, concealing killing intent with mana was considered a basic skill. Doing the same with fast-moving projectiles like arrows or bullets, however, was nearly impossible. That was exactly why none of the legendary heroes' party relied on guns. Only the truly powerful could survive on the highest-level battlefields. The only exception was the extermination squad. Every member carried a pistol. Ivan suddenly leaped into the air and fired while still airborne, using the shot to measure the true ability of his opponents. Another raider fell instantly. The bullet struck with perfect accuracy, and the body collapsed into the snow. Landing lightly, Ivan prepared to eliminate the remaining enemies. His cold, emotionless eyes showed no trace of hesitation. The gang leader exploded with rage. Shouting insults, he charged forward and swung his massive weapon with all his strength. Ivan remained perfectly calm. He simply waited for the right moment. "Who sent you?" the leader bellowed. Ivan effortlessly blocked the powerful overhead strike with his hand axe. Before the larger man could recover, Ivan exploited the opening and delivered a swift counterattack that forced a painful grunt from his opponent. Without giving him time to react, Ivan followed with another devastating blow straight to the face. Blood splattered across the snow. The difference in strength was overwhelming. The impact hurled the giant backward until he crashed heavily onto the frozen ground. Ivan hadn't even disturbed the folds of his coat. He calmly looked down at the defeated leader, who writhed in pain while glaring at him with hatred. "I'll remember your face forever," the man spat angrily. Ivan stared down at him without the slightest concern. "So you're good at remembering faces?" A faint smile crossed his face. That's actually convenient. Being recognized didn't bother him at all. To Ivan, this man was nothing more than the minor boss from the opening stage of a game. The leader's confidence disappeared as cold sweat ran down his face. He finally realized there was no chance of escape. Ivan casually rested his hand on his axe. "Defeating you is the protagonist's role, so I won't kill you. But I know countless ways to cripple someone without damaging their vital organs." His icy gaze never wavered. "Now tell me everything you know." The scene shifted to an earlier memory. Absolutely not. You are not following me. Standing in front of a magnificent Nordic-style mansion, Neris angrily warned everyone around her. If I catch anyone secretly following me, I'll cut all ties with them. With that declaration, she turned around and marched away, carrying her instrument case on her back. King Inar, the berserker, watched his daughter leave with obvious concern. Neris. He sighed. Then a sly grin slowly spread across his face. It's only a problem if I get caught. Without wasting another second, he summoned his elite warriors. Standing before them, he spoke in a booming voice. That's why I've gathered all of you today. Who among you can secretly protect Princess Neris without being discovered? His question echoed through the hall. Immediately, the warriors responded with passionate enthusiasm. I can. Choose me, brother. Their loyalty to their king was absolute. These men had once been ruthless killers. Now they proudly served as King Inar's sworn brothers. Inar raised another problem. Neris already knows all of your faces. She'll recognize every one of you. So tell me, who here can chase after a moving train using only his own legs? It was an almost impossible challenge. None of these men cared about wealth or fame. Their only motivation was unwavering loyalty to their king. Throughout the kingdom of Drone, these elite warriors were known as the Housecarls, the king's most trusted retainers. Excellent. Inar nodded approvingly. But there's still one more problem. We need someone who can actually enroll at Street Yansk University. He looked around the room. Raise your hand if you're confident you can pass the written entrance examination. The hall instantly fell silent. These battle-hardened warriors would rather face death than sit through a written test. No chance. I'd rather die. Several men quietly muttered those words. Then, one hand slowly rose into the air. I'll do it, my lord. The volunteer was Mort, a towering housecarl with an unshakable expression. Don't worry. How difficult can an exam really be? He said confidently. Inar looked deeply moved. My brother. The other warriors erupted into cheers. Very well. Go. From this day forward, you are officially a first-year student in the physical education department. Yes, my lord. Mort shouted proudly. He swore to protect Princess Neris even if it cost him his life. 2 months earlier, he had begun his secret infiltration mission. Against everyone's expectations, he successfully passed the entrance examination and earned admission to Street Yansk University. His academic scores had barely met the minimum passing requirements. Watching him struggle through the written exam had been almost painful. The professors could hardly believe how poorly he performed in the theoretical section. But none of that mattered. During the practical examination, Mort shattered every record the Academy had ever seen. His physical abilities were simply inhuman. Is he really just a student? That question spread throughout the university. And that was how one of King Inar's elite housecarls became an Academy student. Time returned to the present. It was a freezing day in January. Mort's true mission had finally begun. For 2 straight days, he had chased the speeding train on foot. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. He hadn't rested even once. Yet he continued running through the snowy wilderness at unbelievable speed. Wait for me, he shouted. I'll kill anyone who dares lay a finger on Princess Neris. His thirst for battle burned fiercely. Meanwhile, inside one of the overturned train carriages, Neris slowly regained consciousness. Groaning in pain, she pushed herself up from the shattered wreckage scattered across the snow. The impact had been devastating. What happened? She muttered in complete confusion as she struggled to understand the chaos around her. Fear quickly overwhelmed Neris. It can't be bandits, she thought, remembering the violent train derailment. For the first time, she realized just how defenseless she was. Because she had insisted on traveling alone and forbidden anyone from following her, she didn't have a single bodyguard nearby. What am I supposed to do now? She thought anxiously. Then something among the wreckage caught her attention. Huh? Her eyes widened. It was her cello. She hurried over, hugged it tightly against her chest, and sighed in relief. Thank goodness, you're safe. She gently stroked the instrument as though comforting an old friend. Suddenly, boom! A powerful explosion blasted apart the entrance to the train carriage. Neris flinched in terror. Someone was forcing their way inside. An instant later, the heavy carriage door flew off its hinges. Eek! She screamed and instinctively backed away. A large hand gripped the shattered doorway. Then, a scarred man stepped into the carriage with a cruel grin. Well, well. Looks like we found something valuable. Several armed men peered in behind him, immediately recognizing Neris as nothing more than a frightened young girl. Trembling uncontrollably, Nurse clutched her cello tightly against her chest. She turned away from them, completely helpless. Outside the train, the captured leader of the raiders was still pinned beneath Ivan's boot. "Please, just kill me," he cried. "I can't take this anymore." Ivan looked down at him with an emotionless expression. "No, you're definitely not dying." His calm reply only made the man even more terrified. Ivan slowly raised his hand axe. "Stop saying such frightening things." The blade drifted closer. The raider screamed in absolute panic. His cries echoed across the snow-covered battlefield as Ivan began his preferred method of interrogation. "Stop. I'll tell you anything. Just not that." Ignoring the pleas, Ivan uncorked a bottle filled with glowing green liquid. Then he poured it directly onto the man's open wounds. The raider let out an agonizing scream. His body twisted violently from the unbearable pain. During his years on the front lines, Ivan had often wondered what soldiers feared most. It wasn't the terrible military food. It wasn't their commanding officers. It wasn't even the enemy. It was healing potions. Without the slightest hint of sympathy, Ivan continued pouring the potion. "Cut off my arm instead," the raider begged. The pain caused by accelerated healing was far worse than the original injury. The sensation was almost impossible to endure. Watching the man scream reminded Ivan of his own younger days. He remembered lying in military infirmaries while nurses treated his injuries. "Don't say things like that. If this continues, we'll really have to amputate." They would always smile while saying things that only made him more nervous. Although everyone called him a national treasure, Ivan never felt especially treasured. What kind of people treat a national treasure like this? He used to think while crying out in pain. Then another nurse would arrive carrying another bottle. "Just endure one more. If it hurts, let me know." She would smile sweetly before adding, "Although, I'm not stopping anyway." The medicine forced the body to experience an entire week's worth of healing pain in only a single instant. The agony was indescribable. After experiencing it countless times himself, Ivan had discovered an entirely different use for healing potions. His comrades in the extermination squad admired the technique. It made interrogation terrifyingly effective. Heal the prisoner. Question them. Heal them again. Repeat. An endless cycle that continued until every secret was revealed. It was the ultimate truth serum. The raider leader finally broke. Sobbing uncontrollably, he begged once more. "I really don't know anything else. Please, just kill me." His body glowed as the healing magic restored his wounds again. Ivan remained unmoved. "No. You still have to stay alive." He knew this man wasn't important enough to kill yet. At best, he was nothing more than a mid-level tutorial boss. The story still had a use for him. As the interrogation continued, Ivan carefully analyzed the situation. If the raider truly didn't know who had organized the terrorist attack, then he was merely a disposable pawn. Or, perhaps something more dangerous was happening. Could someone have placed a memory-blocking spell on him? Ivan wondered. His sharp blue eyes narrowed. The situation was becoming far more complicated than it had first appeared. Then, his combat instincts suddenly flared. Something had changed. The line of fire. Ivan instantly calculated the trajectory of an incoming attack. His mind rapidly traced the projectile's path through the wreckage. Where is it aimed? A split second later, he found the answer. No. A gigantic boulder hurtled straight toward his head. Ivan sidestepped at the last possible moment. The massive rock flew past his face before smashing into the frozen ground with tremendous force. He calmly observed the attack. A firearm would be completely useless against an opponent capable of this. More enormous rocks came crashing through the air. Each one struck with overwhelming power. This attacker was clearly nothing like the mercenaries. The impacts filled the battlefield with dust and shattered ice. As the clouds slowly settled, Ivan remained standing exactly where he was. Calm, unshaken, waiting. He could already tell. His opponent possessed an ability similar to his own. Like Ivan, he could accurately read attack trajectories. Without showing the slightest concern, Ivan spoke. "You can stop hiding now." A towering man crashed onto the ground with tremendous force. The earth cracked beneath his feet. His enormous muscular frame made him look more like a giant than a human. A massive battle axe rested in each hand. It was Mort Dixon. His face burned with fury. "How dare you lay a hand on my niece?" he roared. Ivan studied the newcomer for only a brief moment before reaching his conclusion. This wasn't the true villain of the arc. It was the hero's uncle. Mort tightened his grip on his twin battle axes and prepared for close-range combat. He had already decided that Ivan was the opponent he needed to defeat first. With a powerful roar, Mort launched a massive sweeping strike. Their weapons collided, sending sparks flying as a powerful shockwave rippled across the snowy battlefield. Ivan frowned slightly. It was unusual for an ordinary bandit to possess such overwhelming physical strength. Mort continued attacking without pause. His eyes burned with fierce intensity as he unleashed one powerful strike after another. Ivan blocked a heavy horizontal swing and immediately noticed the strange, powerful energy flowing through the red-haired giant's body. The two exchanged a relentless series of attacks and parries. The sound of steel crashing against steel echoed throughout the mountains. Then Mort brought both axes down in a devastating overhead strike. Ivan barely avoided the blow by stepping back at the last possible moment. For the first time, he wondered if his prediction about this part of the story had been wrong. Their weapons clashed again, showering the snow-covered battlefield with sparks. As Ivan mentioned Princess Neris's name, the tension only intensified. "I have to save my niece," Mort shouted desperately before charging forward once again. Ivan calmly prepared for the next attack. Meanwhile, near the overturned train, several bandits had cornered Neris. One of them sneered, assuming she was nothing more than a frightened survivor. The men grabbed her roughly. Crack! The sound of splintering wood echoed through the carriage. Neris looked down in horror. Her beloved cello had been shattered. "I'm sorry," she whispered sadly to the broken instrument. Then something inside her snapped. Without warning, she grabbed one of the bandits and slammed him into the side of the train carriage with terrifying strength. The remaining criminals froze. Their companion had been defeated instantly. Holding the broken remains of her cello, Neris began trembling. Tears filled her eyes. "You destroyed it. My precious cello." The savage fury she had inherited from her father, King Anar the Berserker, completely took over. She silently bid farewell to the instrument that had brought her so much happiness. Then she slowly turned toward the terrified bandits. The men immediately panicked. "Run!" someone shouted. Neris swung the shattered cello case like a gigantic battle axe. Her crimson eyes blazed with rage. She vowed to make every one of them pay. One unfortunate bandit was struck so hard that he flew high into the air. "Please spare me," he screamed. From a distance, Ivan watched the chaotic scene with mild surprise. As the terrified bandits fled in every direction, both Ivan and Mort simply stood there, watching Neris's rampage. During the chaos, the misunderstanding between the two warriors was finally cleared up. Mort shouted over the noise. "My niece? Is she safe?" For a brief moment, both men fell silent as they processed everything that had happened. Ivan calmly viewed the situation through the logic of an academy story. Main characters never died during the opening incident if an ally was nearby. Realizing what had actually happened, Mort finally understood that Ivan wasn't an enemy at all. He had been protecting Neris from the beginning. Ivan explained everything calmly. The captured terrorist had simply been under interrogation. Pouring healing potions onto open wounds, he added, was a standard interrogation method used by elite special forces to obtain information quickly. Mort scratched the back of his head awkwardly. "I probably should have asked questions before charging in with my axes." Just then, he sensed a familiar presence approaching. Neris emerged from the wreckage, still holding the broken remains of her cello. Although the anger had faded from her eyes, she still looked deeply upset. Mort immediately ran toward her. Relief washed over him when he saw that she was alive. Neris looked completely surprised. "Uncle!" She couldn't believe he was standing there. Ivan quietly watched their reunion. The sight reminded him of the first time he had met Neris 7 years earlier during the war. Back then, she had been nothing more than a little girl crying for her uncle. She had grown so much since then. Even now, however, she immediately started complaining and arguing with Mort. Her stubborn personality clearly hadn't changed. Deciding it was the perfect opportunity to leave before anyone recognized him, Ivan quietly disappeared without a trace. A moment later, Neris looked around in confusion. "Wasn't someone standing beside you just now?" she asked. Mort remained silent. His thoughts drifted back to the brief battle they had just shared. That fighting style. He knew it. The precise movements. The deadly efficiency. The way the hand axe was used. Everything was identical to the techniques of Karalov's elite special forces. The answer suddenly came to him. Ivan Petrovich, the greatest veteran of the hero's war. As the sun slowly set over the railway tracks, Mort walked beside his niece. "Do you remember a man named Ivan?" he asked. A rare smile appeared on Neris's face. "Of course. He was kind, handsome, and truly a wonderful person." Mort quietly lowered his gaze. "I heard he died 2 years ago." Far away from the scene of the battle, Ivan finally relaxed. He let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, his thick beard and the passage of many years had made him almost impossible for his former comrades to recognize. A system notification quietly appeared before him. His mission to safely protect the young princess had been completed successfully. Meanwhile, Nerys and Mort continued their journey toward the kingdom of Karolov, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives. The scene then shifted to Street Basilisa Orphanage. The peaceful sanctuary stood beneath a clear blue sky. Inside his office, Ivan carefully reviewed several confidential reports, confirming Nerys. After finishing those documents, he turned his attention to the next files. One contained information about Isabel, the daughter of the legendary hero Maximilian. Others detailed the backgrounds of several noble students who would soon arrive at the academy. Finally, Ivan studied a portrait of Elphira, the daughter of the Archmage Beal Green. One by one, he carefully analyzed the powerful new figures who were about to step onto the main stage of the story. Ivan also received reports on Lucia, the elite disciple of Enrique, who had already begun carrying out covert missions within the capital. After reading through the endless stream of reports, Ivan leaned back heavily in his leather chair. He was exhausted. His thoughts drifted away from political conspiracies and military strategies. Instead, he grabbed his notebook and wrote a new heading: Things to eat when I return to Earth. The first item he wrote was a steaming bowl of kimchi stew. Then, with complete determination, he added tteokbokki at the very top of the list. He even circled it several times. Nothing ranked higher. As he imagined the spicy rice cakes sold outside Korean schools, he let out a long, nostalgic sigh. He missed home more than ever. Completely absorbed in his thoughts, Ivan failed to notice someone staring at him through the third-floor window. When he finally looked up, he nearly jumped out of his chair. A smiling face was pressed directly against the glass. It was Priscilla. She happily waved at him from outside the building. Completely bewildered, Ivan immediately opened the window. "How did you climb all the way up here?" he asked in disbelief. Did wall climbing suddenly become part of the orphanage's physical education lessons? Priscilla proudly announced that she had won a game of hide-and-seek. As they walked together afterward, Ivan could only sigh. "Next time, use the stairs. I'd rather not see you fall from the third floor." Down in the sunny courtyard, the children were busy playing their favorite game. Their objective was simple: sneak up on the orphanage director without him noticing. None of them ever succeeded. To the children, Ivan Petrovich was almost a mythical figure. His reflexes seemed completely superhuman. His sharp blue eyes constantly scanned his surroundings with astonishing awareness. Without even turning around, Ivan effortlessly caught objects thrown toward his back. The children stared at him in amazement. No matter where they hid, he always found them. One child attempted to hide behind a tree. A faint blue aura surrounded Ivan as he calmly walked over. "There you are." He gently lifted the child by the back of his collar. Although his large frame and countless scars made him look intimidating, his expression remained warm and protective. To every child in the orphanage, Ivan was their favorite person. "Director!" They shouted happily as they ran toward him. Watching them smile, Ivan made a silent promise. One day, he would train them well enough to surpass him. As he watched the children playing together, he hoped they would eventually become strong enough to stand on their own after leaving the orphanage. Only 2 weeks remained before the next generation of heroes would begin gathering. Ivan desperately wished for a little peace before then. Unfortunately, his instincts told him trouble was already approaching. That very night, deep inside a cold, damp basement, Priscilla sat tightly bound to a wooden chair. Despite her situation, she showed remarkable courage. "You'll regret this. My director will come for me." The kidnappers laughed. "And who exactly is this amazing director?" One of them mocked. Without hesitation, Priscilla smiled confidently. "My director is Ivan Petrovich." The room fell silent. For a brief moment, the kidnappers stared at one another. Then they burst into uncontrollable laughter. One of them wiped tears from his eyes. "Ivan Petrovich? That's one of the most common names in the kingdom of Karolov." Priscilla's confidence slowly faded. At that moment, a suffocating presence emerged from the darkness behind her. A woman with long black hair, pointed elven ears, and a blood-red aura stepped forward. Her cold eyes narrowed. "Ivan Petrovich," she repeated softly. There was unmistakable interest in her voice. Priscilla trembled. The woman's killing intent was so overwhelming that it felt as though the air itself had frozen. Barely able to speak, the little girl whispered once more, "Ivan." Back at the orphanage, Ivan stood quietly inside his office. Moonlight poured through the window as he examined one of Priscilla's small pieces of clothing. The caretakers rushed inside in panic to report her disappearance. Ivan calmly interrupted them. I already know who took her. His eyes focused on a black handprint marked with a cross. He recognized it immediately. It was the unmistakable symbol of a notorious criminal organization. Seeing that mark, Ivan quietly sighed. He would have to cancel everything else. The person behind this message wasn't an ordinary criminal. It was someone from his own past. This wasn't simply a warning. It was a personal invitation. Memories from his days in the extermination squad resurfaced. That elite military unit had originally been created by a single individual. The same elven woman who had once promised to leave behind the life of an assassin. Judging by the cruel smile hidden in the shadows, she had never intended to keep that promise. Her identity was finally revealed. Enrique, the legendary shadow blade of the original hero's party. Without wasting another moment, Ivan entered the underground waterways beneath the southern district of Prince Chanka. His destination was a hidden dungeon concealed beneath the city. Years of relentless warfare had sharpened his senses beyond ordinary human limits. It didn't take long for him to locate the entrance. The layout immediately caught his attention. It almost seemed as though the passage had been built specifically for him. Deep underground stood enormous statues honoring the legendary heroes of the Great War. Among them was the monument dedicated to the mysterious nameless hero. Even now, people throughout the kingdom still spoke about the incredible incident when that monument had vanished from the capital's central square without leaving behind a single clue. It had been one of the boldest thefts in the kingdom's history. To this day, no one knew how it had happened. In place of the missing statue, the thief had left behind nothing more than a rough wooden sign signed by Enrique, boldly declaring that she alone had the right to mourn her fallen comrades. Ivan looked up at the stolen monument hidden deep within the underground chamber. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he noticed the statue bore an uncanny resemblance to himself. Stepping closer to its base, he silently read the inscription engraved beneath it. The memorial honored those whose names had been erased from history despite sacrificing everything for the war. It paid tribute to every forgotten soldier who had fallen in battle. Nearby, another stone tablet displayed two familiar names permanently carved into its surface. Elizabeth Kirilovna, Enrique Sergia. Ivan lowered his head in silent respect, mourning the comrades who had given their lives long ago. Standing motionless before the monument, Ivan Petrovich became lost in memories of countless bloody battlefields. With a long, weary sigh, he quietly accepted that he, too, belonged among those who had sacrificed everything. Suddenly, a narrow beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing the entrance to an elegant private chamber beyond. After giving the statue of the nameless hero one final glance, Ivan walked toward the confrontation he had avoided for the past 7 years. The moment he reached the luxurious salon, he immediately sensed a presence he knew all too well. At the far end of a long dining table sat an extraordinarily beautiful elf woman, calmly sipping a cup of hot coffee as though she had been expecting him all along. Ivan silently took the seat opposite her. His expression remained guarded. The woman finally broke the silence. It's been 7 years since we last met. She introduced herself as Serjana Enrique, the former master thief of the legendary hero's party. She addressed Ivan by the military nickname she had always used during the war. Enrique had once killed the ancient vampire who had transformed her, ending centuries of bloodshed before joining the hero's campaign against the Demon King. Although history praised her as one of the world's greatest saviors, she was equally infamous as a ruthless assassin responsible for countless secret executions. Ivan met her crimson eyes without hesitation. She had once been his Grand Master. She was also the founder of the extermination squad. Enrique noticed that the coffee she had poured remained untouched. Afraid it's poisoned? She asked with a teasing smile. Ignoring the joke completely, Ivan spoke without hesitation. Where is Priscilla? Enrique calmly replied that she wasn't concerned about the coffee getting cold. After all, you came from a country where people drink iced coffee. A faint smile appeared on her face as she mocked her former student's hostility. Ivan quietly tightened his fist beneath the table. Enrique reminded him of one of the first lessons she had ever taught him. Only prey reveal their claws so openly. She assured him that Priscilla was still alive. So far, I haven't found a reason to bite her. The instant those words left her lips, a crimson serpent made entirely of magical energy wrapped itself tightly around Ivan's neck. Its overwhelming bloodlust filled the room. More shadowy serpents emerged from the darkness as Enrique questioned him. Why are you taking care of those children at Street Basilisa? Her crimson eyes glowed with dangerous intensity. She couldn't understand why someone like Ivan had suddenly devoted himself to running an orphanage. Despite the magical pressure threatening to crush him, Ivan remained seated without moving an inch. The confrontation had become a battle of wills. Enrique was especially furious for another reason. Ivan had secretly trained a covert operative and sent her into Enrique's territory without informing her. From her perspective, establishing a spy training ground right under her nose was practically a declaration of war. After a brief silence, she admitted that his actions had genuinely wounded her pride. Ivan simply remained quiet beneath his thick, unkempt beard. Enrique secretly thought his rugged appearance looked hopelessly outdated. She had invited him there hoping to settle matters peacefully. However, Ivan's cold stare conveyed a simple message. Touch me, and you die. Enrique found herself unable to understand what he was truly planning. Meanwhile, Ivan silently considered how much information he should reveal. The kingdom of Karolov was far from peaceful. Behind the scenes, it was divided by a fierce struggle for the throne. On one side stood Crown Prince Alexander, who favored military expansion. On the other stood Princess Elizabeth, who sought stability and peace. To prevent the kingdom from falling into chaos, the princess had secretly assigned an agent who had officially been declared dead. That agent was Ivan himself. His true mission was to protect key political figures while operating from the shadows. Ivan knew Enrique suspected he was carrying out secret orders for Princess Elizabeth. However, as she continued questioning him, he began wondering whether her loyalty to Elizabeth still remained unchanged. A troubling possibility crossed his mind. Had Enrique secretly joined the Crown Prince's faction? The atmosphere inside the room became even heavier as the two legendary veterans silently measured each other. Finally, Ivan broke the silence. I heard you've taken on a young female disciple who's entering the academy. Enrique smiled faintly, exposing one sharp fang. She clearly wasn't pleased that he knew about it. Ivan continued calmly. My client is very interested in that girl. I've been ordered to personally handle her protection. He looked directly into Enrique's eyes. If you're not working with the Crown Prince, then you should understand exactly why I'm taking control of this situation. From Enrique's perspective, Ivan's words sounded like a direct threat against her prized disciple. Enraged, the master assassin slammed both hands onto the table and rose to her feet. She couldn't believe he had the audacity to threaten her student right in front of her. Lucia, come in. The door immediately opened. Lucia walked in with her usual bright smile, leaving Ivan momentarily speechless. Enrique instructed her to greet her senior colleague. Then she asked if Lucia even realized that her master wasn't human. Without losing her cheerful expression, Lucia answered confidently, Of course my master is human. She explained that humanity wasn't determined by appearance or race, but by a person's actions and dedication to protecting others. Ivan stood silently, absorbing her words. An awkward silence filled the room once again. Despite the kingdom's deep prejudice toward non-human races, Lucia possessed an exceptionally kind and open-minded heart. Enrique rested a hand on her chair and proudly declared that Lucia was the greatest source of pride in her life. The next moment, a blazing crimson aura erupted around her. Even so, she admitted she truly didn't want to kill Ivan. Without showing the slightest fear, Ivan calmly reached for the tactical axe strapped behind his back. Keeping his composure, he asked a single question. Where does your true loyalty lie? Blue and crimson energy collided violently, shaking the entire room. Then Enrique suddenly frowned in confusion. Wait, aren't you working for Alexander? Ivan stared at her in complete disbelief. I've never even seen that man's face. The suffocating tension disappeared instantly. Both legendary veterans simply looked at each other. They had completely misunderstood one another. Silence once again filled the luxurious chamber. Finally, Enrique slumped back into her chair with an exhausted sigh. Talking to you is such a headache. Your communication skills are terrible. Lucia smiled brightly. I think you two make a wonderful pair. Her innocent comment nearly made Enrique explode with embarrassment. Ivan quietly sat back down and resumed drinking his tea. Privately, he decided Princess Elizabeth definitely owed him overtime pay for dealing with this mess. For the time being, the crisis had been resolved. Ivan concluded that Lucia would remain perfectly safe under Enrique's personal protection. Lucia looked happier than ever. Meanwhile, Enrique looked completely drained, as though she had barely survived an interrogation herself. Watching them together, Ivan couldn't help thinking they looked much more like a loving mother and daughter than a master and disciple. At least the meeting had ended peacefully. After calming down, Enrique asked another question. Why have you been teaching advanced stealth techniques to a bunch of orphan children? Ivan shook his head. I never taught them anything. They learned those skills on their own because they wanted useful abilities to help them find work after growing up. Enrique found that explanation difficult to believe. The thought that children had mastered stealth entirely through their own efforts was almost unbelievable. Ivan then remembered the long walk he had shared with Priscilla. Only then did he realize how incredibly far Enrique's underground hideout was from the orphanage. He wondered why the little girl had risked traveling so far by herself. His thoughts returned to an earlier conversation. Priscilla had looked at him with tearful eyes. "Director, are you going to leave us?" Ivan remembered how a government messenger had found him after 2 peaceful years at the orphanage. Since then, he had already begun thinking about returning home. Most of his free time had been spent writing lists of Korean dishes he wanted to eat again. Looking at Priscilla's frightened face, he realized she truly believed he was preparing to abandon them. With a heavy heart, he admitted that he would probably be leaving someday. Priscilla froze in shock. Moments later, tears streamed down her face. She begged him not to go. To a war orphan like her, Ivan wasn't just the orphanage director. He was the only family and source of security she had left. Eventually, Ivan learned the truth. Priscilla had secretly gone into the city looking for work. Because she moved so quietly, Enrique's subordinates had mistaken her for a trained stealth operative. Realizing how absurd the misunderstanding had become, Ivan gently placed his heavy coat over her shoulders. She quietly asked where he planned to go. Deep inside, Ivan still longed to leave this fantasy world forever. Looking out over the city glowing beneath the evening sun, he answered honestly, "I'm going to Street Yan's University, but I'll come back to visit all of you. You don't have to worry." Priscilla smiled through her tears, relieved that this wasn't a permanent farewell. Ivan thought about everything he had built at the orphanage. He decided he would remain in this world for 3 more years before leaving for good. Knowing the university entrance examination in November would be incredibly difficult, he realized the children had to begin preparing immediately. Filled with determination, Priscilla rushed back to tell everyone the exciting news. "If we get accepted into the academy, we'll be able to see the director again next year." Without Ivan knowing, she also reminded every orphan that the rules of their game hadn't changed. Whoever managed to enroll at the academy would be the winner. From that day onward, every child at Street Basilisa Orphanage devoted themselves to intense training with a single goal in mind. They would earn a place at the university. Back in the present, Ivan sat quietly at his desk reviewing official reports. For the first time in a long while, everything seemed to be progressing according to plan. He marked the mission involving Nereus, the daughter of Einar the Berserker, as complete. Next, he checked off Lucia, the talented disciple of the legendary assassin Enrique. Then he leaned back in his chair and carefully began planning his next move. Meanwhile, a train raced across the open countryside at full speed, carrying passengers whose fates would soon shape the future. Inside, one of the carriages rested a gleaming silver sword, the proud symbol of a legendary bloodline. Its owner was Isabel, the daughter of the great hero Maximilian. She quietly gazed out the window, her expression filled with sadness. The burden of being the child of a legendary hero weighed heavily upon her shoulders. Far above the train, hidden among the dense branches of the surrounding forest, a monstrous creature patiently waited for the perfect opportunity to attack. Ivan often believed that the original hero's party had functioned more like an elite assassination unit than a traditional group of heroes. Their true strength came from infiltrating enemy territory deep behind the front lines. His thoughts drifted back to the war. In a flash of brilliant blue light, Maximilian confronted his enemies with complete confidence. For the hero's party, stealth and secrecy had always been essential to survival. During one fierce battle, Maximilian effortlessly blocked a devastating attack as if it required no effort at all. Watching him fight, Enrique sarcastically complained, "If you're going to make that much noise, why not just announce to the whole world that humanity's greatest hero is here?" Even she couldn't hide her amazement at what she was witnessing. With unwavering determination, Maximilian charged forward once again. "I'm not losing this battle." His sword unleashed countless beams of radiant light, each strike displaying swordsmanship that far surpassed ordinary human ability. When the battle finally ended, Maximilian casually wiped the sweat from his forehead. "That was a decent warm-up." Enrique immediately exploded with frustration. "You almost broke my wrist." The rest of the party gathered together, completely exhausted. They asked Patricia to heal everyone's injuries while another teammate grumbled about Maximilian's ridiculous comment. Nearby, Einar the Berserker laughed loudly, thoroughly enjoying the chaos. His body burned with overwhelming power as he proudly declared, "Men of Drone always leave their mark on history." Later that night, beneath a sky filled with countless stars, the group stood before a towering mountain. A single slash from Maximilian had split the mountain's peak cleanly in half. The glowing trail of his attack illuminated the entire night sky. Beyond the mountain waited the Demon King's army. An endless horde of monsters, dragons, and mechanical generals stretched across the battlefield. Their retreat afterward had been complete chaos. Everyone ran desperately while countless monsters pursued them. Ivan still remembered that desperate escape. The Iron Dragon General had nearly wiped them all out. Above them, one brilliant star shone brighter than the rest. Maximilian pointed toward it with a bright smile despite the blood covering his body. I even split the heavens. Meanwhile, Aner proudly boasted about splitting a mountain while everyone else struggled to catch their breath. Enrique argued with another teammate over how difficult it was to slice through something so enormous using enhancement magic. Looking back on those memories, Ivan couldn't help reaching one conclusion. The hero's party had been filled with complete lunatics. Even among them, Maximilian stood apart. He was the brightest light of them all, a man willing to risk everything simply to reach the stars. Even so, Ivan admitted he had never particularly liked heroes who shone so brilliantly. 4 years earlier, Maximilian had defeated the Demon King. Then he disappeared without a trace, cutting all ties with the world he had saved. People continued praising the legendary hero. But slowly, they were forgetting the man named Maximilian. Back in the present, Ivan rode aboard another train. One of the intelligence officers accompanying him nervously asked if something was bothering him. Ivan quietly observed the agents surrounding him. The entire situation felt increasingly ridiculous. He sighed deeply. Another troublesome problem had appeared. His thoughts returned to the day he successfully prevented the terrorist attack targeting Nereus. No one had expected him to predict the exact date, location, and timing of the attack. Afterward, a government intelligence officer had questioned him in complete disbelief. How did you know exactly where it would happen? The officer became convinced that Ivan had secretly built an enormous intelligence network during his retirement. Unable to contain his curiosity, he repeatedly asked how Ivan had managed to operate such a massive spy organization without the government ever discovering it. In reality, Ivan had simply relied on his knowledge of common story tropes. However, everyone else believed he commanded a hidden international intelligence organization. Ivan never corrected them. True authority often comes from mystery. There was no reason to explain himself. Unfortunately, that misunderstanding created new problems. Now he had been assigned 5 intelligence agents to assist him. Ivan immediately noticed how unbelievably incompetent they were. Their surveillance was painfully obvious. He couldn't help wondering why intelligence agents would all wear identical uniforms. To make matters worse, they all sat together inside an otherwise empty train carriage. Anyone could identify them instantly. It was amateur work at its finest. Ivan couldn't understand how he was ever supposed to enjoy retirement when the current generation of intelligence officers lacked even the most basic fieldcraft. His commanding presence filled the carriage. With a stern expression, he reminded them how proper intelligence work had been conducted during his own military service. Outside, the train continued racing along the tracks. Dark smoke billowed into the bright blue sky, while the steady clatter of iron wheels echoed. Across the countryside, it was becoming increasingly clear that this journey would be anything but peaceful. The intelligence officers quickly bowed their heads. Yes, Sir Petrovich. Under Ivan's cold gaze, they hurried to carry out his orders. Before they departed, he left them with one final lesson. If you're intelligence agents, then your presence should never be noticed. Remain hidden in the deepest shadows. The agents fled in absolute terror, muttering among themselves that Ivan was a terrifying monster who could deliver an exhausting tactical lecture for 18 straight hours without showing the slightest sign of fatigue. They hurried down the station platform as fast as they could. Watching them disappear, Ivan felt completely satisfied. Although Dmitri had assigned them to monitor him, he had cleverly reversed the situation, giving them the perfect excuse to leave while also forcing them to absorb a much-needed lesson. The image of Oscar, the son of the heroic Knight Gale, briefly crossed Ivan's mind. The talented young man, clad in polished armor, was now safely under the protection of those same agents. Ivan felt as though he had accomplished 2 goals at once. He had successfully gotten rid of his incompetent pursuers while ensuring the son of his former comrade was properly protected. Meanwhile, Isabel walked along the station platform carrying her heavy combat equipment. Her expression clearly revealed her irritation. Once she boarded the train, she quietly settled into her seat and stared blankly out the window. Resting her cheek against her gloved hand, she looked completely detached from everything around her. The endless journey had left her exhausted and frustrated, emotions that were plainly visible in her emerald green eyes. A pale, elegantly dressed man with neatly tied maroon hair approached her with a friendly smile, attempting to strike up a conversation. Isabel immediately reacted with open hostility, slapping his hand away without hesitation. Her eyes burned with anger as she ordered the useless fool to keep his mouth shut, making no effort to hide her explosive temper. Despite the harsh rejection, the pale man continued smiling politely. He offered a smooth apology with fake humility that barely concealed his sinister intentions. Isabel coldly told him to get out of her sight before turning back toward the carriage window, her foul mood unchanged. Without another word, the man quietly left the compartment, slowly closing the door behind him. The instant he was alone, his courteous expression vanished. A horrifying grin spread across his face, exposing his true identity as a bloodthirsty centurion demon eager for slaughter. The express train raced forward at full speed, heading deep into the heavily fortified military zone near the front lines. Ivan quietly observed the other passengers. Given the overwhelming military presence, the journey should have been completely secure. However, he had carefully memorized the region's railway map beforehand and identified the only 3 locations where an ambush would realistically be possible. In his mind, the map appeared with bright red circles highlighting each high-risk danger zone. By dusk, the train had safely crossed the first dangerous section without incident. Later that night, it entered the second high-risk area, where the terrain was perfect for a surprise attack. Even so, nothing happened. Ivan tightened his grip around his pistol, remaining completely alert. Every one of his senses stayed sharp as he watched the dimly lit carriage. His icy blue eyes gleamed with determination as he realized they had finally reached the third and most dangerous stretch of the route. The train rumbled heavily along the tracks while an almost unbearable tension filled the silent carriage. At the same time, Ivan's thoughts drifted back to his previous life as a modern Korean boy named Kim Minwoo. Surrounded by passengers who had no idea what he was thinking, he silently questioned whether his calculations had been wrong. He had expected this introductory event to follow the familiar pattern of an academy story, where the train would inevitably come under attack. Instead, everything felt strangely different. He glanced around the metallic interior and began doubting his own predictions. Stories usually followed clear patterns, but this world felt frighteningly unpredictable. Gritting his teeth, he cursed his terrible luck as paranoia slowly crept into his mind. He wondered whether this fantasy world would ignore every rule he had once relied upon. Wrapped in a chaotic crimson aura, he questioned whether this cursed world even had a proper ending waiting for him. Without warning, chaos erupted. Terrified passengers rushed through the corridor, screaming that a bearded man was firing a gun. Ivan suddenly remembered the hero smiling after the final battle. Perhaps that man had completed his role and returned to his original world. His eyes hardened as he wondered what had become of the world the hero had left behind. A vivid memory from his previous life resurfaced. He saw himself as a frightened young man wearing glasses. "What about me?" he silently asked himself. The locomotive released thick clouds of steam into the night, making the destination feel like an unavoidable prison. His hands trembled as he gripped his seat tightly. He despised this place and refused to spend another moment trapped in this fantasy world. Leaning his head against the cold window, he caught a glimpse of his original self reflected in the glass. More than anything, he wanted to sleep peacefully in a real bed for an entire week and enjoy a proper meal. His former self cried out in frustration, exhausted by the primitive lifestyle of this magical era. In the reflection, he even appeared to clutch his own throat as though suffocating. The overwhelming desire to escape became so intense that it caused him real physical pain. A faint purple light flashed across his eyes, snapping him out of the mental collapse just as his fragile state of mind seemed ready to shatter. Then disaster struck. A massive explosion engulfed the train with blinding light. Ivan barely managed to shield his eyes before twisted steel ripped apart and shattered glass flew through the air. The carriage was torn to pieces in an instant as a gigantic fireball consumed the train, scattering burning wreckage into the darkness. There was no escape. The destroyed train cars plunged over the edge of a cliff, falling towards certain destruction. Isabel screamed in terror as she dropped into the endless abyss. Panic consumed everyone aboard. But something inside Ivan changed. The personality of Vin Petrovic completely took over. Every trace of fear vanished from his eyes as his mind became as cold and calm as solid ice. The wreckage fell from the night sky, instantly reminding Ivan of the merciless frozen winters he had endured during his years in the military. Regaining his balance in midair, he fixed a deadly glare on the battlefield below. He knew the tutorial was far from finished, and his instincts had been right all along. His imposing figure crossed in front of the full moon as he dove toward the burning remains of the crashed train. Clenching his teeth, he swore that he would survive and reach the end of this story, no matter the cost. The train had been completely destroyed at the bottom of the jagged cliff. Thick smoke rose from the twisted metal while flames continued to consume the wreckage. Light snow gently drifted over the scene of destruction. Isabel slowly regained consciousness on the frozen ground. Groaning in pain from the violent impact, she struggled to open her eyes and wondered what had happened and how she had somehow survived. A weak, trembling voice asked if she was awake. A warm drop of blood suddenly landed on her neck, causing her to jolt in horror. Looking up, she realized that Sir August had shielded her with his own body. He was covered in deep, bleeding wounds, having taken the full force of the collapse to protect her. Memories of all the times she had criticized and insulted him flooded her mind. She couldn't understand why he would sacrifice himself for someone who had treated him so coldly. Pinned beneath the heavy iron wreckage, Sir August desperately urged her to run. He was certain the attack had been aimed directly at her. Isabel stared at him in disbelief. "You idiot," she shouted. "Why would you save someone you don't even like?" The knight could barely breathe, but she continued yelling. If he was doing this to earn favor with her father, then it was completely pointless. Her father cared about no one. Her eyes trembled as she saw the unwavering determination in the dying knight's gaze. No matter what she said, he refused to abandon his resolve. Sir August quietly admitted that he had never been seeking the hero's approval. He was simply carrying out his sacred duty to protect the hero's daughter. To him, Isabel was the last remaining hope left behind after her father, Maximilian, had disappeared. With every ounce of strength he had left, he continued protecting her beneath his battered body, leaving Isabel overwhelmed by emotions she could no longer control. Ivan observed Sir August with quiet respect. Even while gravely wounded and bleeding heavily, the knight had refused to let go of Isabel for even a single moment. Stepping closer, Ivan stood over them and calmly asked the knight for his name. Coughing up blood, the man answered with great difficulty. "I am August." Ivan nodded before introducing himself. Only then did August realize the true caliber of the man standing before him, though he never once took his eyes off Ivan. As the knight struggled to breathe, Ivan bluntly asked, "Do you want to live?" Without waiting for a reply, he pulled out a glass vial containing a glowing green liquid. He warned August that the high-grade healing potion would cause unbearable pain. The magical medicine immediately began repairing his shattered body. Flesh and wounds rapidly knitted themselves back together, forcing August to endure unimaginable agony through sheer willpower. Watching everything unfold, Isabel silently vowed never to forget this moment as the knight cried out in unbearable pain. Completely delirious from the intense suffering, August suddenly began blurting out highly confidential accounting records and financial reports belonging to his knightly order, convinced that revealing every secret would somehow ensure Isabel's safety. He had completely lost his mind. His bloodshot eyes wandered aimlessly as he rambled nonsense, leaving Isabel speechless. Smack. Unable to take it anymore, Isabel slapped him hard across the face, leaving a bright red handprint. "Don't be an idiot," she shouted, hoping to bring him back to his senses. Instead, August simply stared blankly ahead. A thin strand of drool slipped from the corner of his mouth as his brain seemed to shut down completely from the combined shock and pain. As August sat there in a dazed state, looking as though birds were circling above his head, Ivan casually remarked that the tremendous shock had temporarily reduced his mental state to that of a child. He dryly blamed Isabel for hitting him far harder than necessary. Moments later, Ivan's expression became serious once again. The attackers hiding in the mountains would soon arrive at the crash site, and everyone needed to prepare for battle. He instructed Isabel to carry Sir August on her back. She immediately drew her silver sword, insisting that she was perfectly capable of fighting and had no intention of standing aside while others risked their lives. Despite her brave words, her hands continued trembling uncontrollably around the sword's hilt. Ivan interrupted her without hesitation. He admitted that she certainly possessed remarkable talent, but there was no reason for her to throw away her life by taking unnecessary risks. Isabel frowned in annoyance at the way he spoke to her. Turning his back, Ivan casually remarked that her fiery personality resembled her mother's far more than her father's. His words left Isabel completely stunned. Leaving her standing there, Ivan immediately began organizing the surviving passengers with the calm authority of an experienced commander. He ordered them to build a fire and use the train seats to create makeshift blankets that would protect everyone from the freezing cold. Growing anxious, Isabel warned that a large fire would reveal their location to the enemy. Ignoring her concern, Ivan walked steadily into the pitch-black forest without slowing down. She called after him, asking whether he truly intended to face the enemy alone. Without even looking back, he calmly replied that it was none of her concern. His figure quickly disappeared into the darkness of the dense forest without showing even the slightest hint of fear. Before vanishing completely, he repeated his warning not to worry, because he knew exactly what he was doing. Beneath the cold light of the full moon, Ivan followed one simple military principle. Always prepare for the worst possible outcome and choose the best possible response. On a real battlefield, that single rule determined the difference between survival and death. Moving silently like a phantom through the ancient trees, Ivan watched enemy squads approach with flickering torches. They advanced confidently, convinced they held every advantage. Believing the survivors would flee in panic, they fully expected to hunt them down one by one. Following Ivan's instructions, Isabel gathered the surviving passengers together. She understood that if everyone fled in different directions, the enemy would hunt them down one by one, creating the worst possible outcome. That was exactly why Ivan had chosen the opposite strategy. Instead of hiding, the survivors built a massive bonfire at the crash site, making themselves the most obvious target in the entire forest. The purpose was to force the enemy to abandon a scattered pursuit and gather around a single point. As a result, the attackers unknowingly revealed their own positions. To Ivan, the torches carried by the enemy soldiers shone like bright lighthouses in the darkness, making them easy targets. The enemy advanced confidently, completely unaware that they had become the prey. Watching them carefully through his sights, Ivan knew that the surest way to defeat an enemy was to become their worst nightmare. Steadying his finger on the trigger, he activated his specialized handgun snapping technique, a deadly marksmanship skill developed by the extermination squad that allowed a standard pistol to achieve sniper-like accuracy. Bang! The first bullet struck its target perfectly. The lead soldier collapsed into the snow before anyone else realized what had happened. Panic immediately spread through the enemy ranks. The soldiers shouted in confusion as they desperately searched for the hidden shooter, rushing to surround a firing position that Ivan had already abandoned. He slipped silently through the thick forest. In a place as dark as these woods, carrying a burning torch was no different from painting a target on your own back. Appearing behind another soldier without making a sound, Ivan drove his heavy tactical axe straight through the man's chest with one brutal strike. The unfortunate soldier managed only a single scream before dying. Another terrified enemy completely lost his composure and blindly fired into the darkness while screaming in fear. A flash of steel cut through the night. Ivan's axe sliced the man cleanly in half with one devastating swing, spraying blood across the snow. His movements were frighteningly efficient. There was no room for mercy or honor, only cold calculation and flawless execution. Resting the axe across his shoulder, Ivan let out a slow breath as he surveyed the battlefield. To an experienced veteran like him, these enemy extermination squads were nothing more than slaughterhouse livestock. With practiced precision, he checked his pistol and counted his remaining bullets, making sure every shot would matter. His speed and efficiency were so overwhelming that it seemed as though an entire army had surrounded the enemy instead of a single man. Meanwhile, at the enemy command position, the reports became increasingly disastrous. 3 more soldiers had been killed. Every one of them had been brutally butchered with an axe. Apollo, the pale centurion demon, began to suspect that they were facing something far more dangerous than ordinary guards. This had all the signs of an elite military force. Gunshots suddenly rang out from both the north and the west. Apollo sharpened his senses, trying to determine the attacker's location, but the shots came from too many directions and were closing in rapidly. A disturbing thought crossed his mind. Could the enemy somehow know their exact positions? Remaining calm, Apollo grabbed a rifle from one of his frightened subordinates. It was time to investigate personally. He deliberately fired several shots into the air, not intending to kill anyone, but to observe how his unseen opponent would react. Then everything suddenly became clear. Shock and anger flashed across his face. The entire assault had been carried out by a single individual. His subordinate immediately rejected the idea, insisting that no single person could possibly fire from so many different places throughout the forest. But the truth was hidden among the trees. Ivan had created an intricate network of tripwires connected to rifles taken from fallen soldiers. When an enemy accidentally stepped on one of the hidden wires, the attached rifle automatically discharged into the darkness. "Those are our own gunshots," Apollo roared. He finally realized they had been trapped from the very beginning. The constant gunfire had been carefully engineered to create confusion, making his own men chase imaginary enemies while unknowingly walking into deadly ambushes. Panic quickly spread throughout the remaining soldiers. Believing enemies surrounded them from every direction, they blindly fired into the darkness and even shot at one another. As chaos consumed the battlefield, Ivan silently emerged from the shadows once again and claimed another victim. Analyzing the battle, Apollo realized that the very first shot had merely been a test. Every shot afterward had served as psychological bait, manipulating his soldiers and guiding them directly into carefully planned killing zones. He couldn't help wondering what kind of monster possessed such terrifying tactical ability. For a brief moment, he even questioned whether the hero's daughter possessed some hidden supernatural power. He remembered the legendary hero, a warrior said to have destroyed entire armies alone. Clenching his jaw, Apollo ordered all surviving troops to regroup immediately, while he personally hunted down the mysterious intruder. His soldiers obeyed, though fear filled every one of them. Allowing their commander to venture into those haunted woods alone felt like a death sentence. As the night continued beneath the silent moon, the cry of a raven echoed through the forest, breaking the oppressive silence. Back at the survivors' camp, terror filled the air. Several passengers quietly cried while whispering desperate prayers. Isabel continued trying to bring Sir August back to his senses, but the wounded knight could only mumble nonsense about fireflies. Without warning, the sharp crack of a snapping branch echoed beyond the firelight. Isabel instantly tightened her grip on her sword. An elegant yet intimidating figure slowly emerged from the darkness. Apollo approached the camp with the calm confidence of an apex predator. With overwhelming arrogance, the Centurion demon introduced himself. "I am Apollo, a Centurion of the Royal Guard's 6th Division." His glowing eyes locked onto Isabel as he slowly drew his gleaming sword. "You are the hero's daughter," he declared coldly. His words carried only one meaning. He had come to execute her. Only a few hundred meters away, Ivan leaned briefly against a rough tree, wiping fresh blood from his face. By his own count, he had already eliminated 50 enemies. His blood-stained hands gripped the handle of his axe with the effortless familiarity of a lifelong warrior. Glancing back at the gruesome trail of bodies he had left behind, Ivan concluded that the cleanup operation was nearly finished. With a smooth, practiced motion, he returned his knife to its sheath. Despite the flawless success of his tactics, his thoughts became increasingly heavy as he walked through the blood-stained forest. If this were an Academy novel, this tutorial would be far too difficult for anyone, he muttered to himself. He remembered how easy the protagonist's tutorial had been compared to the slaughter surrounding the train crash. In his mind, he pictured Isabel's situation as though it were displayed on a game interface. Trapped. Surrounded. No visible escape route. The entire situation felt fundamentally unfair. A beginner was being hunted by elite soldiers without even being given a proper chance to learn the rules of combat. To make matters worse, the area boss was a monster capable of detecting firing lines. It was practically a guaranteed defeat. Ivan knew some games intentionally designed their tutorials to be unwinnable, but this wasn't a game. The purpose of this situation was simple. It was meant to kill. Unless some helpful NPC appeared to save her, Isabel stood absolutely no chance. Then Ivan stopped walking. It was time to make his entrance. Kim Min-woo briefly reflected on his own existence in this strange world. Was he really nothing more than a supporting NPC? As he moved silently through the darkness, he thought about all the background characters who never even appeared in the ending credits. Leaping gracefully between the trees, he wondered whether he would ever be able to return to his original world. Taking a moment to evaluate the situation, he found himself increasingly troubled. The absurd difficulty of this tutorial made no sense, and Isabel's life was hanging by a thread. A shadow of exhaustion crossed his blood-stained face. Still, there was only one way to uncover the answers he sought. From a distance, Ivan watched the camp and carefully considered the consequences of intervening. Meanwhile, in the clearing, Apollo held complete control of the battlefield. Compared to the towering Centurion demon, Isabel looked small and vulnerable. "But you're weak," the demon whispered with a chilling smile, savoring his overwhelming advantage. Isabel breathed heavily. Her equipment was damaged, her clothes were filthy, and her determination was beginning to buckle beneath the immense pressure. "I won't interfere," Ivan told himself from the shadows, deciding to let events unfold on their own. Then the sound of steel striking steel echoed through the forest. Driven by desperation, Isabel launched an attack. Every strike missed. Apollo effortlessly avoided or blocked each blow while mocking her. "You fight exactly like those model students who only memorize combat manuals," he sneered. "You're wrong," Isabel shouted as she lunged forward again. The demon casually blocked her attack with insulting ease. The surviving passengers watched in silence, their hearts pounding as they saw their protector steadily losing ground. Apollo coldly explained that swordsmanship was ultimately simple. The purpose of a sword was to drive its blade into an opponent's body. Looking down on her with pure contempt, he expressed disappointment that the hero's daughter possessed so little real combat experience. "Shut up," Isabel roared. Gathering everything she had left, she launched one final desperate attack. The clash was decisive. Her sword was knocked from her hand and sent spinning through the moonlit air before disappearing into the darkness. She stood completely disarmed. Apollo sighed in frustration over the unnecessary deaths of his soldiers. Pointing his blade at Isabel's throat, he asked, "Daughter of the hero, do you have any final words?" Tears filled her eyes. As defeat seemed inevitable, memories of her father flooded her mind. She remembered a harsh warning she had once received. She should never have tried to become a hero. Then she recalled Sir August's words. A hero wasn't the strongest person. A hero was the one with the greatest courage. She remembered the wounded knight explaining that the first step toward becoming a hero was accepting one's own weakness. Long ago, warriors had knelt before their king and sworn an oath not to seek personal glory. Their purpose was to protect those who could not protect themselves. Back in the present, Isabel lay bruised and battered as she finally accepted the truth. She was weak. Apollo wasted no time. He lunged forward to deliver the killing blow. Yet Isabel now understood exactly why she fought. Not for fame, not for glory, simply because helping others was the right thing to do. To her, protecting people should be as natural as helping someone who had fallen. Confident that victory was already his, Apollo attacked with everything he had. Suddenly, a brilliant blue aura burst from Isabel's hand. This power was not born from pride or recklessness. It came from humility, from the sincere desire to do what was right. Her eyes blazed with determination as strength surged through her body. The clash that followed was completely different. Their swords collided again and again, scattering sparks across the battlefield as Isabel moved with a speed Apollo had never imagined possible. The demon stared in shock. He couldn't understand where this overwhelming power had come from. The blue aura exploded outward, illuminating the entire clearing. Then, Isabel delivered a single, precise strike. Under the pale moonlight, her blade pierced directly through Apollo's chest. Blood spilled onto the ground. The demon staggered backward, unable to believe he had been defeated by the hero's daughter. As he collapsed to his knees, broken and dying, Isabel rejected the title entirely. With pride in her voice, she declared, "I am Isabel, daughter of Maximilian and Marie." The demon released one final groan before collapsing lifelessly. As the adrenaline faded, Isabel fell to the ground from sheer exhaustion. Around her, the survivors embraced one another through tears, unable to believe they had lived through the nightmare. Then Isabel felt that something was strange. Looking toward the darkness, she saw a familiar figure emerge from the shadows. Ivan Petrovich calmly stepped over the demon's corpse and confirmed that no enemies remained. Lying on the ground, Isabel laughed with relief. "You're amazing," she told him. Ivan quietly reflected on the battle. In his eyes, this attack had merely been the standard awakening event of a tutorial. In most novels, every villager would have died to trigger the heroine's growth, leaving Isabel as the sole survivor of a complete massacre. The course of the story had changed because Ivan chose to intervene on his own terms. He was no longer just a background character following a predetermined script. For a brief moment, his thoughts drifted back to the war, to the night when the sky had split apart. He remembered the hero's squad and what they had wanted to witness on that unforgettable evening. The hero had simply wanted to confirm that the morning star was still shining brightly above the darkness. Ivan admitted that he had never particularly liked the man, but he had always admired that unwavering light. Whenever the hero spoke about the morning star, he smiled as though it were the most natural symbol of hope in the world. As Isabel caught her breath, she remembered those words as well. Somehow, it felt as though that same light still remained above them, distant yet never fading. Pushing those memories aside, Ivan Petrovich returned his attention to his true mission. His goal was to ensure that the children of his fallen comrades survived long enough to graduate. Even so, something continued to bother him. It was far from normal for demons to move so freely near the capital. Reaching into his coat, Ivan pulled out another healing potion, while considering who was directing the demons and how many enemies had already infiltrated the academy. As he approached, Isabel instinctively froze. She still couldn't tell whether this terrifying man was truly an ally or something even more dangerous. Without changing his expression, Ivan calmly said that he was going to heal her. Even while speaking so casually, the overwhelming aura of a veteran extermination squad soldier sent chills through everyone nearby. Meanwhile, the wounded demon glared at Ivan with burning hatred as healing potion was poured over his battered body. Every drop caused agonizing pain, yet he refused to surrender. "You think sparing my life will make me betray my own people? You filthy human. What are you planning to torture me? Go ahead, try it. I am Centurion Apollo of the 6th Dragon Commander Guard Infantry Division. Remember my face, because I won't forget yours, not even in hell." Ivan had never expected the demon to reveal anything valuable. The very next instant, the demon bit off his own tongue in an attempt to keep himself from speaking. Watching this, Ivan simply sighed. "I guess he's really just a frontline soldier," he said calmly. "I can't believe people still believe that old myth. Biting off your own tongue won't kill you. The human body isn't that fragile. If it were, people would die every day from choking while eating dinner. When you can't even move, the only thing likely to kill you is a heart attack." Without showing the slightest hesitation, Ivan uncorked every healing potion he had and poured them directly into the demon's mouth. You're only making your suffering last longer. I'm not trying to torture you, Centurion. This is just first aid." The moment the demon heard those words, his eyes widened with fury. Poison Spider Petrovich. As the healing potions took effect, his shattered body rapidly recovered. Even his severed tongue regenerated completely, allowing him to speak again. "I heard you were dead. So you're from the extermination squad. I see." Those words immediately caught Ivan's attention. Did this demon fight on the front lines during the war? After a brief silence, Ivan looked directly at him. "Why are you here personally? Someone of your rank isn't the kind of asset your side would normally waste." The demon answered without hesitation. "We couldn't afford another failure." The moment Ivan heard that answer, everything finally fell into place. Another failure. His eyes narrowed. So that's it. Now he understood why someone as powerful as a Centurion had appeared during Isabel's tutorial. Because he had already destroyed the demon's original operation, they had been forced to send an officer-class warrior to guarantee success. But another question immediately surfaced. If this mission was so important, why send only a Centurion, the lowest officer rank? After thinking it through, Ivan quietly let out a breath. "I understand now. There won't be another terrorist attack after this because your mission has already failed." The truth had finally become clear. This entire incident had been nothing more than a terrorist operation carried out by a small group of extremists. Looking directly at the demon, Ivan spoke with calm certainty. "The people pulling your strings will tell the Allied forces exactly that. They'll claim this was the work of a handful of radicals, and then they'll abandon you." The demon slowly lifted his weapon before letting out a bitter laugh. "That makes sense. From the very beginning, whether I succeeded or failed, I was nothing more than a disposable weapon, just like the extermination squad." Ivan stepped forward and firmly grabbed one of the demon's horns. "You have 3 choices left. First, you can remain my prisoner. You'll be taken to the capital city of Breachinkaya, where counterintelligence will seal your powers and torture you until you die. Second, I can release you right now. Counterintelligence will secretly follow you wherever you go, while your own people will brand you a traitor who betrayed them to save his own life." Before Ivan could explain the third option, the demon interrupted him. Closing his eyes, he began reciting a prayer with complete conviction. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I am the northern star in the darkest night. I am the lighthouse upon the storm-tossed sea." He slowly opened his eyes and stared directly at Ivan. "Stop wasting time, and just kill me." Seeing the demon's unshakable determination, Ivan asked a question no one expected. "Before you offered your prayer to the Demon King, are your parents still alive?" The demon looked at him in complete confusion. What? What are you talking about?" After a brief silence, he answered quietly. "I run an orphanage." The moment Ivan heard those words, an old memory resurfaced. Once, he had been given a single mission. Kill the 7 dragon commanders. All 8 strike teams assigned to the operation had been annihilated. Out of everyone who had participated, only Ivan had managed to return alive. When he came back, Elizabeth had spoken to him. "Live the rest of your life quietly. Stay out of sight. Pretend you're already dead." She apologized because she had been unable to stop that mission from being issued. Even so, she told him she was simply grateful that he had survived. Returning to the present, Ivan looked directly into the demon's eyes. "If you still have even the slightest desire to live, then abandon the person you used to be. Live quietly as though you've already died." The demon lowered his head. His face was filled with guilt. "I don't deserve that," Ivan answered without hesitation. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Your loyalty and your faith don't have to define your entire life." He raised his axe slightly. "If you choose to live, I'll cut off your horns. They'll be the last chains binding you." Then he lowered the blade a little farther. "But if you'd rather die, I can continue the swing. This is your final choice. You can live as a person, or leave this world as one." The demon remained silent for a long time, carefully considering Ivan's offer. At last, he reached his decision. He wanted to live. Ivan gave a small nod. Wise choice. Without another word, he swung his axe. With one clean strike, both of the demon's horns were severed, permanently freeing him from the chains that had bound his life. Soon afterward, an official document appeared. St. Basilicia Orphanage Registry. Name: Apollo. Age: 50s. Status: orphan. Race: demon. After everything was settled, Ivan quietly organized his thoughts. The most reasonable conclusion was that this world truly resembled the setting of an academy story. As expected, Isabel, the hero's daughter, had been targeted during the tutorial. However, Because of his interference, the tutorial's difficulty had increased dramatically. That meant the demons were not simply scripted enemies following a fixed storyline. Neither they nor anyone else in this world were merely NPCs. If that was true, then accurately predicting every future event was impossible. There was no point obsessing over every detail. Only one objective truly mattered: keeping these children alive until graduation. No matter how much the players, the characters, the NPCs, or the events changed from what he expected, that goal would never change. A little while later, Isabel quietly looked at Ivan. "Master, if I hadn't boarded this train today, would the families of the people on this train have survived?" Ivan rested his weapon before calmly answering. "Most likely, yes." Deep inside, however, another thought echoed through his mind. "Because they aren't NPCs either." He continued speaking. 30,000 people died every year just to open a path for the hero's party. That was the yearly death toll required to lure the Demon King's army into battles they could never win. It was a desperate strategy designed to eliminate the 7 dragon commanders before finally confronting the Demon King. The price was 30,000 lives every single year. The hero knew it. Ivan knew it. The soldiers knew it. Everyone knew. Even so, the hero continued smiling. Even during the darkest days, when hope was so faint it felt as though the heavens themselves had to split apart just to reveal a single morning star. He had no choice. He had to become the light that everyone else depended on. The moment he gave in to despair, the allied kingdoms would have fallen. Ivan slowly raised his hand toward the countless stars shining across the night sky. "Look up. That is the star your father carried. And now, it's the one you'll carry." Isabel gazed up at the sky before looking back at him with a puzzled expression. "Which one?" "There are so many stars that I can't tell." Ivan looked at her with calm determination. Being a hero isn't about being the strongest. It's about never giving in, no matter how heavy the burden becomes. It's about refusing to lose your smile, even in the hardest moments. That's what we call a hero. He gently placed a hand on Isabel's shoulder. "So, Isabel, daughter of Maximilian, lift your head, stand tall, and carry hope." Isabel listened silently as Ivan continued. "Before you feel guilty over someone's sacrifice, be grateful for it. Then prove that their sacrifice was never wasted. People sympathize with those who drown in sorrow, but they admire those who continue smiling." Ivan smiled faintly, just like the morning star. After a brief silence, Isabel tilted her head with a curious smile. "So, any chance you're planning to shave that beard?" Ivan immediately shook his head. His instant refusal made Isabel laugh, finally breaking the heavy atmosphere between them. Sometime later, late February, St. Jan's University. Despite the chilly early spring morning, the university campus was overflowing with energy. Excited freshmen filled the entrance grounds, unable to hide their anticipation for the new school year. Meanwhile, the upperclassmen watched them with expressions that were almost sympathetic. Long lines stretched across the campus as students patiently waited for the entrance ceremony. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. Then an enormous shadow suddenly spread across the entire grounds of St. Jan's University. Every student instinctively looked up. "A warship?" One student gasped in disbelief. "An airborne battleship," another shouted. "Holy crap, isn't that the national crest of Kalon?" A brief explanation followed. The national crest was the official emblem that represented the nation of Kalon. At that very moment, an officer came running over in a complete panic. "We're in serious trouble. We're completely doomed, Your Excellency. A Kalon warship is hovering directly above breaching Kaya." Isabel looked up at the enormous airborne battleship before replying with obvious irritation. "My good man, I do have eyes." Although she remained calm on the outside, she couldn't help thinking to herself, "I just hope they don't end up killing those Kalon people." Meanwhile, Ivan quietly observed everything taking place. Isabel and Acetus had both survived the train derailment without suffering fatal injuries. Considering what had happened, that alone was nothing short of a miracle. As for whatever the elves were doing in the sky, Ivan felt it could be summed up in just 2 sentences. At that exact moment, a powerful voice echoed from the airborne battleship. "Your border security is a complete joke. We protect our own children." Most people would have dismissed such a bold action as impossible. Ivan, however, knew it was entirely believable. If he had to guess, Elphira, the daughter of the elf who had once traveled with the hero's party, was probably aboard that warship. Just then, Isabel called out to him from behind. "Mister, didn't you say you worked at the academy?" Before Ivan could answer, she excitedly continued. "Wait, with skills like yours, you have to be a professor, right?" "Which department?" Physical education. It has to be PE. Or maybe not. Does St. Jan's University actually have an assassination course? So you really are a PE professor? Ivan stopped walking and quietly looked back at her. The hero's daughter had finally arrived at the academy. Then he gave the last answer she expected. I'm the gardener. As they continued walking toward the campus, Ivan silently organized his thoughts. Priscilla had already arrived safely. Lucia, Enrique's apprentice, had been in the capital from the very beginning. Oscar Gale's son had also successfully reached the academy. That meant every child connected to the hero's party had safely arrived. Looking toward the university's main building, Ivan quietly muttered to himself. The entrance ceremony is in the main auditorium. I suppose it's time to prepare for whatever happens next. Even the opening ceremony couldn't be taken lightly. In stories set at academies, something unexpected always happened during the entrance ceremony. At that very moment, the scene shifted elsewhere. A man wearing a white laboratory coat stared blankly into the air with complete confusion. What is this? Floating before him was a mysterious translucent window. Across its surface, a single message was displayed. Congratulations,